Awesome. So thank you, Inka, for the introduction. I really wish I could bring some sun from the Munich to Lithuania. So thank you, everybody, whomsoever who is in the call now. Thanks for joining in. Good afternoon or good morning from whichever part of the world you are from. I was really excited to be here and thoroughly enjoyed the talks also from yesterday. I hope we all had a collective learning and looking forward for the same for the rest of the day today as well. So before we start to the topic of outcome-centric team, let me give you a small introduction about myself, because I know my name would be a little tough for you to pronounce. My name is Archana Maliyackal. I am basically from India, now living in the land of Oktoberfest, Munich. I'm here for a couple of years, 5-6 years, although my German is not that great. I started my career in the tech back in early 2000s, and I decided, or I accidentally became a Scrum Master in early 2000s again, when my project was transitioning from waterfall to Agile. Since then, I was an Agile coach for almost 6-7 years in the Agile space, really loved it, and to helping the organizations as well as the team. And at some point, I decided to make my hands a little bit more dirty, and I decided to move to the role of a product manager. So that is a nutshell my career. I am a product manager now, working for HSA, which is Home Shopping Europe. I'm the product manager for the app team, the mobile app. Apart from that, I speak in different conferences and sharing my knowledge, and also a traveler, learner. I always try to do at least 2 new things every year. That keeps me motivated. So before we get into the topic, I want to give a disclaimer here. I'm not going to talk about any fancy frameworks. So I know all of you might already know about many frameworks out there. So I won't be talking about any frameworks here. However, what I would be sharing would be some few practical steps, small little steps, which you can go back today and take that with your team. So without a delay, let's start with what is an outcome. I know yesterday in many of the talks, we were talking about customer value, we were talking about impacts. However, I would like to have that shared understanding with you all so that we are all on the same page before what I'm going to talk for the next 20 minutes. So outcome is a change in human behavior that drives business result. Let me help you understand this with a very small example. You are here today to attend the conference, right? All of you. And that is actually an activity you are doing. That's actually, in product terms, I would relate that to an output. If you're going back to your teams tomorrow and you make a change or from whatever you learned today, that is an outcome. That is a change in human behavior. And that is exactly what we are talking about today, that change in customer behavior that drives business results. And why is it important, right? Why? Because outcome centricity is the core. You can imagine it like a GPS for your teams. It will help you as a product manager or as a team to take that decision. It helps you create that shared understanding and help your team to create those innovative solutions. And this is why outcome centricity is the core. It is what is very important there. Few years back, when I was as working as an Agile coach back then, I was with the e-commerce department of one of the companies. So my goal then was to implement OKR frameworks. So objectives and key results within that division. So I was new to the topic. I was never an OKR expert before. I started learning about it. I started talking to the leaders. So the marketing team, the CRM, the sales team, so different department heads. I was talking to them. They were all talking about the impacts. So the direction where the company wants to go. They were all talking about the revenue. Yes, good. To a certain extent, I can understand from a leadership perspective, the focus what we have for those business impacts. When it comes to the teams, I started having some workshops with them to implement this framework. And I was asking this question: what is the customer value did you produce in the last 6 months? And the answer to that actually made me surprised, or I was really shocked there. Because most of the teams whom I was talking to gave me the response: we released this feature, we built this API, we did this cloud migration, the lift and shift. I'm pretty sure some of you would have heard about it. And I think maybe less than 2%, I think that could be a PM probably, spoke about what benefited the customer. Right? So I started talking to the product manager. What is wrong? I mean, how do you, once you release the feature, what happens next? Did you forget it? What is going to happen? What is happening there? So the product manager, she told me, so there is a team, the data team, who has all the data and the customer feedbacks and everything there. You know what? They sent me a report every 2 months about all these customer feedbacks and everything. So I said, wow, great. So what next? What do you do with this? I was really excited. Then the product manager told me, you know what? I look into all these data. But unfortunately, we cannot do anything because we are already in the middle of the new development phase and we already released it. So I'm pretty much not doing anything with that. And what about the teams? Sometimes I tell something, but if not, no. So I took a step back and started thinking, if we have to implement the OKRs, it's like a big framework, right? You need to have measurements, you need to have the outcomes, impacts, whatever you talk about. How can we implement that if team is not even aware of their customers? So you can imagine it, something like you going to teach a child or children about addition, 1 + 2 = 3, where the children doesn't even know what is 1 and 2. They don't even know the basics of counting. So where can you start, right? Take a moment. Now, let's think about your situation. Imagine you're going back to your teams tomorrow, yeah, and asking these questions. Who is your customer and why do they use your product? How many of you think that your teams can answer this? I would say you are lucky if at least 40% of your team can answer this question. I will mark you as in the quadrant of lucky. Because many times this information is missing. So the step one where you can start is understanding the customer. And here, I know somebody will have a disagreement here when I use the word persona, is because persona is generally, I know the UX designers or product managers have these and they use this. But when it comes to the teams, many of them don't know. And why is it important? You think about a train journey you're doing every day. You see a person. Even if you don't talk to that person, you will still remember them. And that is exactly how having a persona, have a face associated, have some demographic details. I'm not telling to be really flashy about it, but have that. And this helps really your team to understand your customer. Because many times, what your team thinks your customer is would be totally different from what the reality is. And it is important for the development team to understand this customer because they are the ones who build and co-create solutions with you. If you don't know about your customer, how would you create and build solutions for them? How would you create that empathy for them? Here is what the second step, understanding why the customers use your product. Because in outcome centricity, we tell that change in customer behavior, right? So if you want to change a customer behavior, you have to know what is happening now. Without knowing that, how would you know what has to change? So understand that trigger. Any customer who is using a product will have a trigger. And this is from the book Hooked Model from Neil Ayar. So here he explains about those triggers. So it's need not be that your team has to understand this whole circle, but understand that trigger. Why do you use a specific product? Take Instagram, for example. If anybody is using Instagram here, why do you open it every day? I know it might not be every day for everybody, but why do you use it? It is the fear of missing out, the FOMO effect. So similarly, understand why your customer is using your product. Then what happens? As an Agile coach, here again, the mistake that I have done. I used to have the workshops with the team, defining a persona, having a user journey map, creating the design sprints, whatnot, right? Where we talk about customer, we are talking about problem. And the gap, what I found is, yes, you create that workshop, 5, 6, you create the workshop, you would put it into the Confluence or Wiki, wherever that storage location is. And then after 3, 4 months, let's say 3 months, you ask your team, do you know the product vision or the persona we were talking about the 3 months? Oh, you know what, Archana, it is there in the Confluence. You go and read it. Yes, of course I can, but do you know about it, what we discussed the other day? We create them. We all create them, but then we forget them. So how can you make it in your day-to-day journey, include it in a day-to-day journey? One very small tip, what I have is practicing storytelling. So Jeff, the famous author, he has mentioned that product management is about 80% storytelling and 20% execution. Although I don't know if I don't agree to that 80% here, but still, storytelling is a powerful way. When you talk to your teams, every day, during your refinement, during your planning, when you're having that conversation with your stakeholders, bring that persona in. Talk about that story. Another simple technique. Remember your last review session, sprint review, monthly review, demo, however you call it. How was the features presented there? If your team had done something, how it was presented. Take a moment to think about it. So, what I have seen, or the anti-pattern was, the teams come in, or the PM or one of the devs, they will open the app or they will show the screenshot and say, okay, we developed this feature where customer can click on some button to make a purchase. Now, try to flip it around. How about you telling a user journey there? So in the same example, think about Alice. Imagine Alice is your persona. She is using an app or a website, whatever, and she forgot to order a gift for her friend Lily. Tell it as a story. And with one click, she could make the purchase. Now, if you think about this, your stakeholders are you're talking about your customer. You are in the shoes of your customer. She is happy. What did your customer get? Making that order faster, right? So using a user journey in your reviews and telling that story to whomsoever you are with, your stakeholders, your team, that would definitely bring in that customer in your day-to-day conversation. Step number 2. What is winning the match for your team? Does your team know where they're going? Otherwise, they would end up creating those features and there is nobody to blame, right? So why is it important that your teams should know about it? Because if they don't own it, they're not going to be accountable. They're not going to be responsible for your product. And for creating that product, it is important that they're aware of it. They will have that accountability when they are part of it. So here, the 3 common challenges. These are not only the ones, but the common things. What I have seen is feature-focused roadmaps with deadlines on top. 0 product discovery and team not involved in the discovery itself. So I have been in that shoes where we were asked to deliver the roadmap with deadlines on it because of the business criticality. And what I have faced or what I have seen is the moment there is a timeline there, that it automatically refers to as speed. Translate to a speed for your team. And what is going to happen? Quality. Nobody no longer care about customer anymore. It's more about building, So which is why, and from a company perspective, yes, sometimes we have to put those timelines there. But when it comes to teams, focus on the next 1 to 2 months, because in ideal case, you would be doing a discovery. Even with the result of that, you would be including and iterating. So there are different versions of roadmap, how to do that there. One of them is the now, next, later, which is really simple. And when you talk to the teams, talk to what is important now. And of course, give them a bigger picture, but try to prevent putting dates there. And this is a famous quote from Albert Einstein, where he talks about when there is a problem, and if he has to have a solution, I would spend 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. And what do we do with our teams? We spend 55 minutes building the solution rather than even checking, is it the right thing to do? Is it even worth solving? Does it solve a customer problem? And why this happens? And here, any product manager in here can relate. Anybody who see you will stop you and tell you, you know what, I have this brilliant idea. You can do it, and this is what it is. Everybody will come to you with ideas. You take a problem to the team, you have 10 ideas. So we are not lacking ideas anywhere, right? And what we do is all these ideas, the product manager will put as refinements in the backlog items. The designer creates a design, engineer develops, then nobody measures. And what should you do differently is about the co-creation. Having that product discovery to ensure that your feasibility, the usability, and the viability. Because we can't be right all the time. We still have chances that whatever you are rolling out is not used by the customer. But at least you can ensure, you can have that minimum validation that we are putting time and money into things which have at least a decent chance to succeed. This is where it comes, the difference. And with these roadmaps, and if you always strive for 100% predictability, or with this time I will release this, with this time I release this, you will not have innovation. By default, the engineers are hired for being smart. You have to use that, their smartness, to build solutions which are really innovative and disruptive. The third thing, the learning culture. So if you remember the story which I told from the past, the product manager, what did she say? She mentioned about the data which she checks every 2 months. And what happens? Organizations, we always build on top of the build. Have you ever been in a situation where a feature is removed? Have you ever been? I have not. So the most important thing is, are you validating what you're building? And here, the common pitfalls, challenges, we try to enable the team, but the team doesn't have access to the data. Nobody shares it with them. They don't have the access to the customer feedback. Only the PM or the UX person is involved, or the researcher. We don't have a culture to learn. Have you ever had in your cadences a slot where somebody talks about data? So how do you fix these? Starting with, how do we measure? So what I do now, when I take user stories or with the team, or when we discuss the hypothesis or epics with the team, we ask this question, how do we measure this? It could be, okay, the customer feedback, or it could be the analytics, whatever way it is. Have an understanding, how do we measure? Second thing, having those analytics in place. In my organization, we have a very strict policy. No feature is released without tracking. So, because if we cannot track, we cannot learn. And that could be not necessarily the quantitative thing, but whatever way it is. Step number 3, having that cadence. Every 2 weeks, set up a session with your PM and the customer, in person, whomsoever, having that customer data with you, to share it. So here itself, I remember with the PMs, I set up a bi-weekly session. And what happened? The first week they came, they complained, no, we don't have any data because it is with this team. The next week, again, they came. How do we solve it? We started discussing about it. And in the third week, one of the product managers finally managed to bring that. That is where that small change happened. And from there, we had a process in place, and etc., etc. So to have that cadence where everybody talks about the data and the customer insights, if you don't have it, start it. I'm pretty sure if it doesn't work in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even a month, that's going to change for good. So knowing about your customer, having that product discovery, having that culture of learning, does it make your organization outcome-centric? No, it's not going to make you outcome-centric, because outcome-centricity is depending on several other factors: your organization, your leadership buying, your culture, your strategy. There are so many things which is associated. But what it would help you is having an empowered team. An empowered team is the core of outcome centricity. And what it brings is clarity. And we as leaders, our job is not to dictate solutions to them. We have to create an environment where our teams can collaborate. We work towards a common mission, as in that is our job, fostering that culture. These are the famous quotes from Teresa Torres. An empowered product team has a clarity of purpose. And with all these, what we are trying to achieve is bring that clarity. Even if it's not happening at your organizational level or at the strategic level, you still can have the clarity in the team in whichever way possible. So take that step back and ask yourself, can your team describe their customer and their needs? Are you involving your team in product discovery? Do you have that culture of measuring and learning from it? And if you don't have any of these, it's time to start. So like any journey in our Agile, say it the Agile transformation, scaling, mindset, outcome centricity is also a journey. I can tell you, it took me almost an year to bring that to the teams. And the most important thing is you start that journey and aim for progress instead of reaching that perfection. And how do you know it's going to happen? When your team owns things, when your team owns your product, they are accountable for the results. This is when you know you have succeeded. So I'm hereby trying to conclude my talk. So go back to your teams tomorrow, start with these questions. And if you have not started that journey, take that simple small step towards the customer and the outcome centricity. For any questions, you can reach out to me in LinkedIn or via email or in the conference. We can have a small coffee chats today. Thank you, everybody. Now I will.
Thank you very much. Maybe someone has any questions. I'll check the 2 chats that we have. Don't see anyone on hold.